In
I'm going to call the city council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Counselor Weber.
Here.
Counselor Moe.
Here.
Counselor Rodley.
Here.
Counselor Blackwell.
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Here. Did you hear me?
Yes, we did. You were
Okay.
coming in loud and clear.
Oh, sorry. My video won't go.
We have two work session items tonight. First one is SPD Accreditation Award with Lieutenant Crowley and Chief Shear. Chief, you weren't on the official billet for this.
Good evening, Council Mayor, and thank you for allowing us the time this evening to share with you all our recent agency accreditation efforts. With me tonight is Lieutenant George Crowley, who among many of his other duties was assigned the task of leading our department effort to achieve accreditation. Accreditation establishes a set of best practices that creates consistent and measurable standards that are verifiable by an independent body. And in March of 2023, we began this effort. And in April of 2024, we were presented our accreditation credential by the Northwest Accreditation Alliance. The executive director for the Alliance, Scott Hayes, is present tonight remotely to explain a little more in detail about the accreditation process, how being accredited benefits an agency, and the ongoing process to achieve reaccreditation at regular intervals. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Scott Hayes.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and members of the community. As introduced, I am Scott Hayes, the Executive Director for the Northwest Accreditation Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council and present the Springfield Police Department with its first award of accreditation under the leadership of Chief Andrew Shear. Law enforcement has experienced a changing society with increased demands for police accountability and transparency. As in our past, our profession must face these challenges and work with our community to address their concerns. Accreditation is one step towards building community trust and the legitimacy of our profession. The Northwest Accreditation Alliance was formed under the direction of the Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police, the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, and the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, and provides accreditation services for 94 law enforcement and communication centers. Accreditation goals are straightforward: to support the continued improvement of law enforcement services, to establish best practice through professional standards, establish agency accountability and transparency, and enhance management of operations. For the Springfield Police Department to become accredited, it had to adhere to 108 law enforcement standards. Compliance is generally in the form of policies and procedures and adherence to Oregon revised statutes, Oregon administrative rules, and city policy. Our standards are established through the best practice both nationally and through changes in federal and Oregon law. In addition to each of the 108 standards, the agency must also show proof of compliance that it is following policy and best practice. Then reaccreditation will occur every 3 years. This is really a monumental step for any agency to be evaluated by an outside independent organization and have its policies and its procedures scrutinized. I know that there are a number of staff involved in the process, but I would also like, as the chief did, to recognize the efforts of Lieutenant George Crowley, who worked diligently to prepare the agency for the review. So Chief Shear, on behalf of the Northwest Accreditation Alliance and its 24-member board of directors, I would like to congratulate you and the city on you receiving your first award of accreditation.
Thank you, Scott. And just to echo what Scott said, I can't thank George Crowley enough. He really, for the last year, this has been his full-time job to get us to this point. Now, there's a lot of people involved in reviewing policies and training documents and all that kind of stuff, but George has really run point on this effort and has worked very hard to get this accomplished in approximately a year. And it typically takes much longer than that to get accredited. So I just wanted to publicly recognize him for the good work he's done. And with that, if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions? Victoria.
So I just want to say congratulations on that. I worked really hard on an APWA accreditation for the city of Eugene, and I know how much work goes into that. And we had probably 15, 20 people working on that. So for just one person to have to put all that together, that's a ton of work. And you guys are awesome. Thanks so much for your hard work.
Thank you.
Joe.
Yes, thank you. I echo Victoria's words. That's amazing that you guys did that. And I think what needs to be pointed out too is that not only is the police end of our city public safety police department, the jail is also accredited as well through a different standard, through the Oregon jail standards. Those are also very, very rigorous. And for the police side of things to be accredited is huge. I believe it or not, I read you that whole report, and that was a lot of reading, a lot of work. And tip my hat off to you, George. Amazing work. And thank you, Chief, for supporting him throughout that entire time. And I think it says a lot for our city. And it just speaks well to how things are being run at our PD now. I'm just very, very proud of you guys and the agency itself.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Corey.
Thank you. Just to pile on the praise. I really appreciate this work. As someone who y'all get to hear me say it, I'm like, I love a process and I love a plan and a place to grow from and build from. And just know that the process of going through this is also, I mean, the process is a big piece of the work too. And the fact that now we have all of these policies in place. And I was reading through it and, it talks about how we manage money and how we manage people and all of these pieces. And all of the congratulations and appreciation, because I think this is just another step in the direction that we're all trying to go in terms of the transparency and the relationship with the community and how we do public safety in Springfield. And I just appreciate it so much. And thank you.
Thank you.
I heard 3 years mentioned in there. What did that mean?
Every 3 years, you have to go through a re-accreditation process. So you have to show that you've maintained the standards that you've set, and they come out. And I'm told, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, that the re-accreditation process for some can even be more rigorous than the original accreditation process. So it's no joke to maintain, it's no joke to get this, and it's definitely no joke to try to maintain it. So we have to keep our standards very high.
Thank you.
Beth.
I just want to say nice work, you guys. Congratulations.
Michelle.
I can't go without saying congratulations too. I mean, we need a full slate here, so great work.
The thing I want to point out is how important the actual getting ready for accreditation is, right? Like the awards, the outcome, it is how much time you guys spent going through basically everything and looking at it and improving. And this is just continues to be the, a lot of work that we're putting into PD, and it's definitely showing in the community. I appreciate it. I think it's really important to note it's really the process that gets you guys there. And I was glad to see it. All right. I think that is it. Thank you. All right, the next thing we have is review of city council operating procedures with Mary Bridget Smith, and we do this annually, not every 3 years.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm just going to get set up here. So we are doing a work session on the annual review of your operating policies and procedures. I have a PowerPoint prepared mainly to keep myself on track, but certainly ask questions as we go through this. But my intent is to talk to you about the proposed changes for the operating policies and procedures for the year, get your feedback on any other changes you would like to see or other issues you'd like me to look into. So to just kind of set the stage here for what we're trying to do today, these are the rules for how you conduct your business. And, council meetings are important. The majority of the work that happens at the city heads through a council meeting in one way or the other, whether it's through a contract approval or a disbursement or a decision by the council. Mainly your operating policies and procedures deal with how meetings work and how they're structured, but there are other sections in there about the boards and commissions, reimbursements, speaking on behalf of the council. So a few administrative things are in there as well. This is a requirement from the charter to annually review your operating policies and procedures. And then lastly, these really vary by jurisdiction. One thing we do when we're reviewing these is try and compare and see what other jurisdictions are doing. And it's always sort of interesting to see, you can kind of tell if a jurisdiction has worked through an issue, sometimes then that shows up in their rules. So we do pull a lot from other jurisdictions, from the League of Oregon Cities and other sources. But at the end of the day, these are really the rules that this group used to get their business done. So they don't have to be the same as other jurisdictions. I did want to take a minute and just sort of go through some of the highlights of some of the things you've done in the past few years in relation with your operating policies and procedures and how you do your work. Some of the things include the council vacancy process, having some more language in there about how a vacancy, how that process will work. Shifting to remote meetings, media at executive sessions, the security and sergeant of arms language was updated, and then having a direct reference to public official legal obligations. That's a real lawyer sentence there, but that's talking about public official ethics, anti-discrimination laws, and public meetings and public records, and those obligations that you as counselors have to uphold those. So, looking at the changes, one of the main things was to work on boards and commissions and committees. This was a discussion and direction from your 2023 retreat, actually. The main points are there. That's to continue to interview new applicants for BCCs. The mayor does retain the discretion to not have to re-interview somebody who's reapplying. As you know, people can be on a board for 2 terms in a row. And then to discontinue what we were calling the batch recruitment. And that was when we were trying to have all the recruitments occur in November and then do one maybe in the spring, depending on the vacancies. So no more batch recruitment. What we'll do now is just recruit as openings occur. When I was looking at the operating policies, I realized that this section it just had become a little bit of a Frankenstein. When you tweak sections by section, sometimes it just doesn't really hang together. And so what I'm proposing is to do the redraft of that section 9 that's in your packet. That really takes the current language, moves it around, gets rid of the redundancies, and also tries to set out the different types of committees to sort of set the table a little bit so we're clear in our heads when we're talking about something like the Budget Committee and the Planning Commission as opposed to the Museum Committee. And I think that just helps a little bit in terms of decision-making. I was wondering if anybody had questions about BCCs or any other things that you wanted to see included.
Anybody have questions?
Great. Okay. Then moving forward for some of your follow-up from the 2024 retreat that you just had, I wanted to highlight 2 areas. One has a proposed change. One is just to make sure that that the council is clear on the process. So the first is talking about council meeting agenda setting, and that's in section 351. That talks about the process of getting things on the agenda. So if you look at those rules, the first part talks about, things where you give direction at work session. Well, then those items have to come back often to the regular session to have official action. So this is a perfect example of that. I'm talking to you about your operating policies. You'll provide me with direction. I'll come back in June and ask for a vote. And that will be the official action that adopts the policies. The other way that things get on the agenda is through council leadership. So that would be the mayor or the council president can ask to put things on the agenda. They're supposed to run it through one another, so it has sort of a check. Then the other way that things can come on is if a counselor bring something to council leadership. Council leadership may say, no, we don't think that should come up right now. Then that counselor can go to the full council. And if it gets a majority of the council, then that item can be placed on the agenda. If that, I have not seen that happen very often, but I would tell you probably what I would recommend is that that counselor do that in an open session, like business from the council, talks about, hey, this is XYZ issue. I'd like to talk about it for here. And then if I were at the meeting, you know, in my role as city attorney, I'd recommend you do a vote and then get that approval. And then city manager's like, okay, great, put it on the agenda, and it moves forward. The other way that things get on the agenda would be, you know, more an administrative role, either through the city manager or through legal requirements. So if you look at our agendas, there are always lots of things on there that, you know, we see come up quite a bit, you know, disbursements, contract approval, other things that make the city run. Those don't have to go through like a, you know, check with the policymaker, like, should we have this on the agenda? The city manager can just have those things scheduled. Often we'll have them scheduled either months ahead of time, or we'll know, you know, this time of year is when we do this sort of meeting. So that's getting something on the agenda. And I think there was some discussion about that at the 2024 retreat. The second issue is a recommended change I have about remote attendance at meetings. And this is this section 3.31, I think it is. And it talks about, it sort of restates the council's obligation to attend a meeting and asks that they tell the recorder ahead of time if they're going to be remote. I think that's a leftover from pre-COVID remote meetings when setting up the tech for that took a little more work. And so the recorder wanted a heads up so they could get them. I mean, we used to have like a phone and, you know, it was always kind of difficult to make that work. But now people can, counselors have the flexibility to attend remotely at their discretion. And so it's not really language that's serving, and it would be my recommendation to remove it.
So.
Go ahead.
No, I think the new language looks good. I guess I'm thinking about it might still just be a best practice to sort of let somebody know, because I think they still have to look for that person.
Yes.
And so I don't know if it is as strong as it used to be, right? Because we don't, like, nobody needs to get permission to attend remotely. But I think it's that just kind of that prompt to go, okay, we still got to tell somebody at City Hall, otherwise they're gonna expect me to walk through the door
Right.
when I'm in the virtual crowd.
Yep. Okay. All right, and then more 2024 follow-up would be, there was one issue, it looked like, relating back to boards and commissions. It looked like there was some conversation about maybe having alternates on certain council committees. And I didn't know if the council wanted to have further discussion about that, or if that was just something that people were talking about, but I thought it just might be good to bring it up here and see what you guys think. And it was my understanding it was just for council subcommittees like finance and judiciary and legislative would be the two that you, standing ones that you have now. Any feedback on that or ideas?
Any opinions? Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember the conversation at the retreat, but I do remember us talking about it, and it was particularly for those thinking about especially, and we'll see if we get to it here, especially if we go to, you know, just doing it not necessarily by ward. I think there was talk about would it be helpful to have on the planning commission or whatever, to have people who were alternates. But we never talked about what would that mean? Like,
Okay.
would that mean that alternate had to go to meetings?
Right.
Would that mean, you know, so what would it mean to actually fully step in as an alternate? So I think it's unfinished in
Okay.
terms of, and maybe people have changed their minds, but I remember us just mentioning that, and like, how do we keep things moving along smoothly, but never got into the weeds about it.
Thank you, Mayor. Point of clarification, that observation came from Councillor Blackwell, actually, who was not able to attend the retreat, but we had kind of a debrief prior to. And, you know, Councillor Blackwell, I don't know if you want to expand on that, but the general gist of it is, you know, we do these recruitment processes. It takes, you know, time for the applicants and the council. could we establish something similar to like what we do in human resources, which is called like a hiring list? So you can retain a list for a certain period of time. And then if for some reason, unexpectedly, a committee member is not able to attend or fulfill the duties of that committee, then we can move to somebody else that's been previously approved on that slate of candidates if we're fortunate to have a slate.
Beth.
And I can elaborate on that. Yes, so that wasn't another counselor filling in for a position that came out of the Arts Commission. In one of our meetings, they were talking about having, there was somebody that may need to step away because of obligations, but still is very skilled and would love to participate. So could there be a situation where they can still step in at times and participate? Could there be someone that, we had just went through an appointing, we had appointed a gentleman, and there was another one that had applied, but we didn't have a space for that person. And then this came out afterwards that someone might be leaving again. And could there be a list where we could fill that position from that list, maybe instead of going back out for recruiting again, when they've already went through the process, they've already applied. She was also a very good candidate, good fit. So that was the thought on that.
Joe.
Yes, thank you. I can see what you're saying, Beth, and I concur to a degree, in a sense that I would be a little bit, I don't know if skeptical is even the right word, if in regards to having a person step away, come back, step away, and come back, so to speak, as opposed to, are you talking about having a fill-in as opposed to someone leaving and then coming and then having them as a backup to take that position into for the rest of the term? I'm not sure exactly what you're saying.
Well, maybe there are two different things. Maybe one was where he could step away and come back and fill in at times. And then one is a situation where there was maybe a list that they could fill from that had already interviewed and was approved
Okay, so I
for a vacancy.
yes, no, I think it'd be great if we had a list, so to speak. I think we need to be cautious in regards to how we create that list, because there's some people that interview that are passed up because we don't think they'd be a great placement. So I think when there's interviews, then we need to have that secondary discussion as far as, okay, do we want to put this place or this person on a list? I'm fine with that. I think that's a good idea. But I don't know if I would want to have people stepping away and coming back and stepping away when.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think they were just saying they do so much. They need hands on a lot of, like, hands on deck for a lot of their events, and getting, hands on deck is kind of difficult. So they had more people to pull from at certain times. It would be helpful. I think
Yeah,
that
I
was
can
kind of
see
the thought
that.
process behind that.
If we had a special event, I could see that. But as far as just filling in, I don't know if that'd be great. But I do totally concur with creating a list to fill vacancies as they occur. Totally.
Ori.
Thanks. I appreciate us kind of sort of teasing it out a little bit here. I think that having a list of folks who were like, those would be really great, but we're going to choose this other person is great, as long as somebody's going to manage it. I mean, that's the thing about those kind of things. It's like, oh, we're going to manage that list and figure it out. And is it going to be for specific committees or all committees, or it'd really just be nice if we were keeping track of people who volunteers for these committees and are, sharing information with them. However, I also kind of agree with Joe, the sort of stepping in and stepping back. My concerns about that are, if somebody has to pull away because their life has changed, I think they could still come back in the next term, right? They could still reapply. And it's just that so much happens in terms of like group dynamics, that maybe if it's like that, where they're like, I can't be the chair, or I can't be a part of this, but I still would come and help with events, then that's something that the committee staff or whatever could do. I think that just being really clear about, because we do so much to be so clear about what the expectations of the committees are and when people need to show up and all of that, that just the coming and going could kind of mess with the flow. But I'm all for having a list or alternates to pull from.
I think I'm good. I think I'm good with a list, not good with the alternates. And the other thing that I think about is that sort of coming and going piece. There's some of these committees like the Planning Commission that has, you know, ethical compliance paperwork they have to get keep filed, right? So different committees have different requirements. So I think if we had that, we're going to go to a pre-approved list, especially if somebody, you know, sort of has to leave suddenly, that would be fine. The other question that I had is how long would that list be active, right? Because to me, it feels like maybe a quarter that list could still be active, like long enough that it's still sort of fresh, opposed to us sort of cold calling somebody, you know, a year after the fact and saying, hey, do you want to be on Planning Commission? Anybody, Victoria?
Talked and I forgot what I was going to say. so never mind.
Beth?
That's something I wanted to add to that. That was one thing that they had kind of brought up, like even if the list was 3 months or something, because we had interviewed 2 great candidates, we chose one, and then one person said, you know, this is a little more than I thought it was going to be, and life's busy, and I think I'm going to have to step away, and that other person may have been able to possibly step into that role. So that was kind of that's what sparked that conversation, I guess. So.
Joe?
Yes, thank you. And I totally see what you're saying, Beth, and I agree with what you're saying. And I think too, Mayor, is that, and Councilor Rodley, that I think that we could put a expiration on that list, and we could look at probably the best way to do that, maybe through whatever agenda review or whatever. But all the committees, so to speak, they have term limits or timeouts, expirations on terms fairly frequently. And if we have a committee of 8 people, well, we can pretty much count on someone having, you know, terming out every year. So, but I think that once a quarter or once every 6 months at the max, we could or should have a list, and that would I think would help staff and just planning for all this movement and all the time it takes. I think 3, I'm fine with whatever term, but I don't think we should leave them on there for more than, you know, for a year. But I think 3 months or, you know, a quarter or half a year at the most, I'm totally fine with.
Okay, Mary Bridget, is that enough to sort of go forth and design some sort of language that will be awed by?
Yeah, I think we had some conversations offline with the city recorder about this. I don't think you have to add this to your rules. You could just decide to have a list that, you know, you keep for 6 months. And if a recruitment comes up, Allison can check that list and say, oh, hey, so-and-so might be interested. And then see at that time, you could make a decision like, oh, hey, you know what? Nobody else is interested. So maybe we move forward, or we have like a bunch of candidates and maybe you want to think about that differently. But that makes sense, especially volunteers. I know it's people are moving around.
And the average recruitment, how long does that actually take from the moment we put it out until we actually see, you know, have completed the appointment?
And if you want to check me on this, but I would say when you used to do batch, like we would go out in August and then you'd be interviewing maybe in November and appointing.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And appointing then November, December.
Victoria?
Yeah, I remembered. I hate this getting old stuff. So my question was, if we interview a couple people,
Mhm.
one person we choose, but we kind of had a tough time between the two because we liked both of them, why wouldn't that person be approved, so to speak, from the council, and then that be given to the staff person? And then it's they should, I'm wondering, why do they have to come back to us for that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the process is that someone is appointed by the council at a regular session that's from the charter that says you're going to have, now I got to remember them. It says the mayor can create its own committees and then appoints people as per your rules. Your rules say that all appointments flow through the council because it's a council committee. So let's say you had that great number 2 candidate, right? An opening comes up shortly after. Then Allison could bring that to agenda review and say, hey, so-and-so, you know, could pop into this position. Then that could go to the council to consider without an interview and just go ahead and appoint that person at the next regular session.
So it's because of the way it's written that it has to come back to the council? Because I mean, we have a million things. It's like we've
Yep.
already made that decision. Why does it have to come back through the council again?
And that's because the role of the council and that it's their committee and it's their committees and that they are appointing the people. But it's just really Committees is something I can tell you that varies by jurisdiction, certainly. There are not all jurisdictions do that, but some do.
Okay, thank you.
Joe,
I'm just thinking, Mary Bridget, that's something that seems like we could just slap on the consent calendar, can't we?
Yeah, you probably could. Yeah.
So it wouldn't need a discussion or any of that. Just we can throw it on the consent calendar. Counselors can read the consent calendar. If they have any issues with it, they can pull it from the consent calendar, have discussion or not, and just have it appointed that way.
Sure.
all right.
Okay.
I think we're ready for the next one.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next exciting topic here would be letters of support. So this was another topic that I saw on the retreat minutes, and I thought I would just take a minute to talk a little bit about how letters asking for city support sort of come to the city and the differences between them, and then see if there's a little process improvement we can do here for the rest of the council. So there are many requests for letters that come to the council, for example, for, I don't know if ceremonial is the right word, but, the mayor or the city could write a letter on behalf of, like on the agenda tonight, you have Public Works Week and EMS Week, things that show support of a ongoing cause here in our city, but aren't particularly political. And something that would just be a nice thing to have a nice letter from the mayor that says, hey, we all support X, Y, and Z. So the way the rules work, those can go through without having to come back to the council and have a vote, right? Because it's not something that really is a policymaking issue where you're all going to want to weigh in. It would look like, hey, this is from the council. But I think it sounds like it would be helpful for the rest of the council to make sure that you got a copy of those letters. So if a constituent was like, hey, I saw that you did this letter, you would know. And maybe there's been a gap there. So we could definitely work on that. Then the other type of letters are letters that are more concrete, showing of what the council's position is on an issue. Those come to you, the letter comes to you, you vote on it. If it's not unanimous, and then we're supposed to put on the bottom there, what the vote was. So I think probably the last one was about the Glenwood transfer station and the IMER. I think that was the last example. So those are ones that come to the council. They're a statement of the council on a particular position. Then the other types of letters are more what you would think of as kind of typical city support letters. Those are the way the rules work now. I just want to confirm that that works for all of you in terms of how we deal with them. But those can often run through the mayor and the city manager's office pretty efficiently.
Any questions? Michelle?
In looking at 8.6.1, the council input portion, I'm a little, I guess maybe unclear reading that. Does that put us into any serial communication issues or does it put us in any?
Yeah, I think
in there?
I think generally you'd probably be okay because it's not something you're going to deliberate on if it's just showing support for something. But if it was something you thought you would deliberate on, you'd want to be careful about that for sure.
Great.
I might be making this up, and maybe this is just like a conversation that I've had just with the mayor, but I think maybe we talked about this too. I think in terms of the copying counselors on the proclamations, I think it's also helpful to know when the mayor has taken a stance on something that hasn't necessarily come to the council.
Got it.
And I know that that's the mayor's prerogative, and he or she gets to do that. However, that comes up for me more than there was a proclamation. It's more like, well, I see that Springfield is for X, Y, or Z. So it would be helpful to know as that's happening. So it can be like, well, someone is, but maybe not every someone.
Yeah. And would copying be sufficient if just on the council
just knowing about
we
it.
know?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That sounds great.
And I think to kind of extend that logically is when we get into the legislative session, there's a lot more content that comes out of, to different committees and sort of whatnot. So I guess just be aware of that piece is that, as we're submitting testimony, I think that's the place to kind of package it up and put it in a memo or something like that.
Okay. All right. That's a good point. And I shouldn't undersell it as just being like the fluffy stuff. I know that there's other.
That's okay. I sign a lot of fluffy stuff. Corey.
Just to add to that, because I'm thinking about how organized we're getting about our legislative committee and things like that, that I think, and not to I'm not saying you should write a whole new thing. And maybe it's a thing we need to talk about in a work session or something. When the mayor mentioned, legislative stuff. It's like getting really clear about what our legislative priorities are as a
Mhm.
council, and that's where our focus is. Because I think that sometimes people might be, as an individual, and I'm just maybe for myself, that I'm really for a thing. And just getting really clear about what hat they're wearing when they're representing that in front of the legislature, because we do have priorities that we are all kind of
Yeah.
supporting. If that makes sense.
I think that's a good point. I think what I could do as a first step is when the legislative committee kind of for the, because it's a big session too. It's going to be a regular session for the next legislative committee. There is that subcommittee of the counselors, and spend a little time talking about process. Because the other thing that happens with the legislative session, as you know, time becomes an issue. It's like, oh, we need this now, and so, because we're just not in control of how things will move forward. And then that can be tricky for trying to circle back and let everybody know what we're doing. And so I'll put a bug in the legislative aide's ear and we can talk about that for sure. Okay.
I think we're good. Keep going.
All right. We're almost there, I promise. Okay. So there's a couple other changes that I am recommending. As I go through these, I just try and see if I see something that I think, we should probably change that in an effort to sort of modernize these rules. So section 3.9 has language about, which is kind of funny now considering how we work things, but actually getting information to the media if they requested it, sort of before we posted it on the website would be like, we would send it to them weekly and kind of have this whole process about public records. We have an administrative regulation about public records. Agendas are posted on the website. It really isn't doing anything for anybody. So I am asking that we would remove that section about agenda and supportive materials to the public. And then the second one is a small change, but I think it's important. So this talks about how we adopt ordinances. So ordinances are the sort of equivalent of a statute at the state level. It's your legislative expression of setting policy. It's set out in charter, code, and the operating policies. The operating policies are the least controlling of those three, right? We always start with the charters like your constitution, the codes like your statutes, and the operating policies are like your administrative regulations or your policies. There was one line in there about having, and as you know, we do ordinances require 2 readings, right? So you'll hear Neil do the first reading at the first time. We'll talk about it. The second reading is often on consent, but not always. Sometimes it could be heard at other times. The operating policies have it at the next consecutive meeting, but that often is not something that we can do, particularly with planning and annexation ordinances and that kind of thing. So I'm asking just for a little flexibility there to give some discretion to the city manager that those can be scheduled kind of at the best time instead of the next consecutive meeting. And why that is so important is that if you don't adopt your ordinance correctly, it's void. And so just think a second of like, if we don't adopt, we can generally fix things, but if you don't adopt the budget ordinance, right? Or you don't, or that's a resolution, but if you don't adopt an annexation ordinance or a land use decision correctly, that can have some real consequences. So just trying to clean that up a little bit. And that's in your packet as well. And then last slide is really just asking if there's any other topics or direction that you'd like me to look at. This will come back to you on June 17th for a vote. This is something that requires a 2/3 vote majority because it's your rules. So we'll do it with a resolution and a vote on the 17th.
Is there anything else that people want to add?
Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay, well, thank you. And I'll see you in June.
Perfect. Thank you. That was the last item for the work session, so we are going to adjourn until 7. I'm going to call the regular session of the Springfield City Council to order with a roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Counselor Weber.
Here.
Counselor Moe.
Here.
Counselor Rodley.
Here.
Counselor Blackwell.
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
And Counselor Pictionary.
And we are expecting Counselor Pictionary anytime. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. It's to the flag of the United States. Indivisible. As we begin our meeting tonight, there are two designated times for public testimony this evening. Under business from the audience and public hearings. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the entrance of council chambers and give it to the city recorder. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please raise your hand in Zoom. The order of public testimony is as follows: anyone in the council chambers, and then anyone who has raised their virtual hand. First item, please.
Mayor, for the record, Councilor Pictionary has joined virtually. The first item is Springfield Upbeat. Item number 1 is Mayor's Recognition EMS Week Proclamation. Mayor, this is your item.
All right. So we've got a couple proclamations this evening. I'm going to read them and then we'll have the groups inside to have a picture. And I think at the end, we will have all the folks back for one big picture, since is a thank you to all the different city employees who serve this community. The first one I have is Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services are vital public service, and whereas the number of emergency medical service teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whereas emergency medical services teams consist of first responders, EMTs, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical service providers. And whereas the members of the emergency services medical teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continued education to enhance life-saving skills. Whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical service providers by designating this week Emergency Medical Services Week. I, Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield, in recognition of events, do proclaim May 19th through 25th as Emergency Services Week. This is the 50th anniversary of the EMS Week, and it is EMS Week honoring our past and forging our future. I encourage all community members to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities.
The pit.
These guys go. We can one big picture. Get closer. The EMS chief. Scooch like you like each other. Come here, Rob.
They're looking at you first and then.
Follow instructions well.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
We're just gonna stay standing here the whole time. No, we'll wait. We'll keep writing stuff. So know how to reassemble it. We
Thank
literally
you.
just got this council change. The next one's the Public Works Week proclamation. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are vital importance to the sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Springfield. Whereas it is the public interest for its citizens, civic leaders, and children in Springfield to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest in understanding the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective community. Whereas this year, 2024 marks the 64th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. I, Sean Van Gordon, do proclaim May 19th through 25th, National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to join with the representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees to recognize substantial contributions that they make in protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life.
Like color coordinated stuff. Okay, look at that. That's hilarious. Yeah. Let me help I turn it on. Sorry.
We'll be pro.
You'll be frozen by the end of that. Okay, one more, 1, 2, 3. I think I'm gonna try one more without the flash. That's much better, thank you.
You're responsible for that? All right. This is the last one. It's the National Law Enforcement Week proclamation. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officials serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of Springfield Police Department. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,785 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. Whereas 556 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Memorial this spring, including 224 officers killed in 2022 and 332 officers killed the previous year. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Memorial's 36th Candlelight Vigil on May 13th, 2024. I, Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield, do hereby proclaim May 12th through 18th as National Law Enforcement Week in the city of Springfield and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and communities across the nation.
That was nice, thank you.
Don't go anywhere. All right, come on back. We're gonna do one big one. We gotta make the PIOs happy. Come on, public works people. Come on, Counselor, squish in, stand in the back.
Come on over.
Oh, that's right. You're coming a little short, you know. Sure.
I guess we don't have.
Michelle, the
I guess we don't have to. Should I go this way so we're more centered?
no, we were trying to make a place where Michelle could be seen.
Short one back here.
Tippy toes, Michelle.
Okay, one more.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we just stop now.
Making the motion to accept.
This is Counselor Missionary in the background.
Yeah, you know, I saw that and went, okay, cameo appearance.
All right, next item, please.
Next item is the consent calendar.
Even though it's not on the agenda, but I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Gail, could you call the roll, please? The vote,
Yes,
please.
Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is public hearings. You have two public hearings this evening. The first one is amending the Springfield Municipal Code to limit liability for use of public trails per ORS 105.668. This is a first reading, no action requested, and Christina Kraz is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a proposed ordinance that would amend the Springfield Municipal Code to add a limitation of liability for the public's use of trails and access ways, essentially walking or biking facilities or equestrian facilities that are not located on public streets within the city of Springfield. This is a statute that's been in place for a number of years, but came to our attention after the legislative session this year. And because Springfield is less than 500,000 people, we have to affirmatively adopt into this limitation of liability in order for it to take effect. So that's what the city attorney's office is recommending in consultation with the risk management and human resources. This would apply to any, not only to the city and its employees and officers and agents, but also to volunteers who help to maintain public trails that are owned or maintained by the city, and nonprofit organizations associated with those volunteers, as well as adjacent landowners who dedicate property for public easements and trails to the extent that they're not profiting or charging money for that access by the public. And the purpose of this is really to incentivize people to help us maintain our trails, to allow the city to more easily provide those public recreational or access opportunities, and to limit liability for basic negligence, gross negligence, which is essentially acting way outside the bounds of what's considered normal, reasonable care, or things that are unusually dangerous and for which there's strict liability under the law would not be covered. So if somebody was to, sort of intentionally have misconduct, it wouldn't be limited by this ordinance. And so I recommend you hold a public hearing just to solicit input from the public. And then this is a first reading, so there's no further action tonight.
Are there any questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I don't have any cards for this item. Or is there anybody wanting to testify online?
It appears there are no hands for this item.
Then I'm going to close the public hearing. This is first reading only, no action tonight. Next item, please.
Next item is liquor license endorsements for the renewal period of 2024 through 2025. Jeff Pascal is here for this item.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So this is our annual visit regarding liquor license renewals, which will start coming in July 1st to be reissued. Something that we hold annually. The liquor licenses are governed by section 7.3 through 7.34 of the Springfield Municipal Code, which is part of the packet and lists the criteria. One of those criteria is police activity, that sort of thing. And so what you can see is a list of the 172 probable or anticipated applications that we'll see. And then, really thank PD, because as we can see is the report that we're getting from PD that lists it out is really detailed and easy to read on the activity. So nothing really jumped out. Calls are slightly down over the last year, over the same time period this last year. And so there's really no reason staff doesn't recommend approval by the council after holding a public hearing.
Are there any questions before I open the public hearing? I'm going to open the public hearing. I do not have any cards for this item. Is there anybody wishing to testify online?
Appears no hands for this item.
I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the liquor license renewal list.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber.
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yeah.
Counselor Rodley.
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell.
Yes.
Counselor Doyle.
Yes.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Mayor, the next item is business from the audience.
Okay, before I call the first card for business of the audience, from the audience, I do want to, I've got some additional commentary about Finley Heights to add. Now's the time in the agenda for the council to hear business from the audience. If you've signed up to speak to the council regarding the Finley Heights annexation, which is on the agenda this evening, the public hearing in this matter has been closed. While you may speak to the council at this time, the council cannot consider any new information and public comments made this evening in our decision to approve or deny this application, unless we also allow the applicant to respond to the new information. The council will make its decision based on information that is already in the record, which includes all public testimony provided to the city council during the public hearing of April 4th, 2024. It's April 4th. Oh, typo. April 1st, 2024. I have. Hold, please. Thank you. If once I call you up, please come up, state your name and location in the city for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes. Peter DeFazio. You do have to turn it on, Peter.
Okay,
There you
there
go.
we go. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. My wife, Myrnie Doubt, and I live at 1083 South 70th Street. We've lived there for about 35 years. Annexations can be routine and beneficial to the city. Annexations can also be very problematic. In this case, we're talking about an area which has been declared by the state of Oregon, Dogami, to be geologically unstable and subject to landslides, and there are many evidences of landslides on the property. Also, the state published a map, which they withdrew because people were very concerned about losing their homeowners insurance. The map was withdrawn, but you can still find a copy of it, and this was declared as a very high hazard fire risk area. And the problem would be for the city to provide the services. Sub would have to provide services in a geologically unstable area, subject to water main breakages and disruptions. The current drainage is through just two natural drainages into one runs through the back of my property into South 70th Street through a very small culvert on the side of the street. The other drains directly down to South 71st, which is 12 feet wide. You would be accessing that 12-foot wide street up a 16-degree slope with emergency vehicles and then trying to come back down and evacuate people. So you would have problems with fire evacuation, with emergency medical services, and potentially with public services from the Springfield Utility Board. Just on a personal note, during the ice storm, I have a generator and a wood stove. We stayed until Monday, but when all the trees started falling everywhere, like the one that took out Councilor Pictionary's house, we decided it was time to evacuate. I called the city and I said, could you put a little gravel on my street? It's a public street, South 70th Street. It is gravel, but it's covered by 1.5 inches of ice and you can't even stand on it. And they said, no, we're sorry. We cannot get any equipment up there. So my wife and I evacuated by sliding down the street on our butts with backpacks on. The dog looked very puzzled as we went down the street. And, so to go further up that hill where you already can't provide services, I think would be very problematic. I realize that you cannot consider new information, but in any case, I wish to give my voice to the council on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ronna Frank. Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, with your name and location for the record.
My name is Ronna Frank, and I've lived at the top of South 71st Street in the Thurston Hills for the past 24 years. I appreciated Councilor Michelle Weber wanting to know what the historical attempts for annexation requests were of the property and why they were not approved. My neighbors and I emailed a response to all of you on April the 10th listing those reasons. Destabilization was then and is now the concern. Skyline Estates, the first tentative subdivision plan that they submitted in January of 2007 was the only previous request for annexation. And it was for the same 7.94 acres of tax lot 500 that the present owner of Finley Estates applied for. That plan was deemed incomplete by the city of Springfield due to multiple issues associated with steep slopes, lack of consideration for landslide hazards, and legally permitted density and access. Their second tentative subdivision application in June of 2008, Skyline's owner wrote, "The development plan and layout has changed significantly from the first one. Therefore, we are starting anew with the tentative subdivision application process. The city limit boundary divides tax lot 500, and the proposed subdivision will be entirely within the city limits." That plan was not approved due to the same issues in the 2007 plan, with more concerns about landslides, additional traffic, transportation, and road issues. The third subdivision plan in May of 2009 went through a pre-submittal review where Public Works stated they couldn't approve the development at the time due to the lack of any proposed access to two of the lots with no provision of water. Engineering cited ongoing concern of stability of any structures in an area known to be prone to landslides. The owner was provided with a checklist of deficiencies with the design and did not proceed further. More recently, at the November 8th, 2022 development issue meeting for Finley Estates application for a 52-lot subdivision and possible annexation, Tom Severs, City of Springfield Planning Department, stated these following constraints on annexing the balance of the property. Quote, "Due to the topography of the site, obtaining adequate public services will be a challenge without potential destabilization of the site. There are steep slopes, high susceptibility of landslides across the site, tree removal, street and lot grading, stormwater retention, wastewater, drinking water, infrastructure, and underground power could all be contributing factors to destabilization," unquote. "Because of the destruction and destabilization from the ice storm and the trees that fell, I've not lived in my home since January 14th and can't for a year. The damage to our properties and land on South 70th Street was extensive. I also slid down on my butt. We are living through the results of destabilization, and we urge the council not to approve Finley Heights' request for annexation." Thank you.
Thank you. The next person that I have is Catherine Fraz.
Is this a bar?
It is green, it is active.
All right. I'm Catherine Fraz and I live at 895 South 71st Street. I've been there for over 37 years and I appreciate this opportunity to speak regarding the annexation of tax lot 500. I'm a member of a group of neighbors who advocated for our safety and that of all residents of the Thurston Hills during the 2007 to 2009 previous failed development attempt. Prominently displayed on an index card on my home office bulletin board is a quote from a city planner which states, "Safety is a first consideration of hillside development. The dangerous lack of safe road access was a major reason for the lack of city approval of this plan." Our group Our group has a wealth of experience and a mountain of information and research regarding issues of development on a steep landslide prone hillside. We met in person with the developer, Willamette Lane director, and city planning officials. We contacted public servants from Springfield Utility Board, the state of Oregon, and Eugene Springfield Fire Safety. We employed legal counsel and the services of a private consultant. We purchased CDs of development meetings from the city and poured over every detail. We have records of countless email communications with planning officials, detailed maps of the area and development plans, and a thorough knowledge of the hillside development overlay of the Springfield Development Code. At the first reading, Mark Russ stated we did not update this section of the code. Advocacy during these years came at great personal cost. We labored through full-time careers, serious illness, the death of family members, and all the challenges of everyday life. We respect and support each other. Because of our experience, I feel a strong responsibility to speak for other residents of our Thurston Hills neighborhood. The tax-paying constituents and their families living in the well-established neighborhoods between Main Street and the potential development site deserve to live unthreatened by the dangers posed by heavy equipment and the multitude of vehicles that development would bring. There is no safe route. Hundreds of families would be subjected to countless interruptions and the increased potential of tragic pedestrian vehicle accidents and property damage. Annexation opens the door to a development plan. A historic, well-documented landslide occurred during road building for the Mountain Gate development in February of 2008. Springfield city officials asked 4 families to evacuate their homes until the hill could be stabilized. Springfield has a well-deserved reputation for fiscal responsibility. There are numerous examples of prudent flatland development featuring family-priced homes. Steep hillside development is a dangerous and expensive use of taxpayer funds and precious public servant time and resources when other options are safer and wiser. The increased cost of developing a steep hillside does not address the need for affordable medium-density housing. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Carlin Kephart.
Hi, I'm Carlin Kephart. I live at 846 South 71st Street, and we've lived there for about a decade, so I'm actually a relative newcomer compared to my neighbors who are speaking tonight. I don't have a lot to add to my previous testimony, but I do appreciate the attention that has been given in review for our previous public commentary. With all that my neighbors have mentioned, I don't have a lot to add, as I mentioned, but other than to further emphasize the virtual impossibility of the future development of this land, which therefore makes the denial of this annexation a necessity. The council is within its authority to deny, as the packet says, several points not meeting road access due to slope and private property, seismic and geological data, and the fire marshal's concerns mentioned in Part C, finding 22. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the last card that I have. Neil, is there anybody online that wants to testify?
So we have one hand at this time for this item. It's Royal Mortier. And Royal, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Beautiful. My name is Royal Mortier. I'm actually the owner of Finley Heights, the full 25-acre parcel that we're seeking the annexation on. First, I'd like to emphasize that we are seeking annexation of a small segment of a much larger area, and the seeking of annexation and the possible forthcoming development, I believe, are 2 totally separate issues, and we should just focus on the annexation. Primary items of concern that have been raised by the neighbors, and obviously were something of our own concern, with myself being a structural engineer as well, is the slope stability. However, prior to purchasing, we had an extensive and very well done geotechnical report from 2008 done by Gunnar that very easily laid out how to handle this. That did not consider, so we move forward with the purchase. Since then, we've done additional test pits, we've done borings, we've installed an inclinometer, and employed branch engineering for testing and monitoring services. They provided another geotech report. That geotech report was sent out to all the counselors this morning. And we apologize that that was not something that was provided previously or requested. And we would like to have the record reopened to have that included in here to meet the concerns of item C. In that report, it again, just like in Gunnar, says yes, slope instability is something that occurs in this area. Frankly, it occurs on any slope throughout all of Oregon, and it's something that can be managed. It also should be noted that the majority of the 25 acres is not in a land flow or prior landslide area. However, many surrounding properties that are developed or were recently developed are within that same land flow. To address some other concerns, utilities will be brought in from above the property. We have talked with Malama Lane and Sub, and they will be installing a fire break to alleviate and reduce the fire risk, as what was brought up by Mr. DeFazio. And our utilities will be brought in from above, and that further limits the risk of any land flow. In addition, we're leaving over 11 acres of the development area open, non-touched. This is to provide, again, lots of vegetation, full slope stability, and prevent any future things. Road layouts are also being done to limit soil cut. But again, this is all pertaining to the development. This is just the annexation, and we would like this addressed and approved. Thank you.
And Royal, before you go, could you state your location for the record? It could be either your address or the city you're from.
Yeah, I live in Gulf Breeze, Florida.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, is there anybody else online that wants to testify?
Yes, Mayor, we have a hand for Cecilia Tomcal, and Cecilia, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Good evening, council members. I would like to, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you. Can you state your name and location for the record?
Yes, I'm Cecilia Tomkal, and I'm a landowner near the intersection of South 72nd Street and Holly. And I'd like to remind the council members that you were just addressed by Mr. Mortier. He may have said that things can be stabilized and that being included in bringing everything into annexation are two things that are separate, but there are some aspects that are incorrect about that. For one thing, I know, because I was the person that did the land use of our property, 5 acres that were subdivided at my location into 2 housing development spots. And it was purely that we annexed our building sites into the city for annexation so that we could have a building plot. So the fact that we really cannot separate annexation from the idea that there will be, the next thing is a building plan. We've heard from all kinds of people saying all the dangers of extra traffic, that the infrastructure of the roads will not support it, emergency vehicles, and in our previous statements about water runoff, which is very dangerous for the surrounding areas. And even more lurking is the idea of the soil. There are landslides in these hills, one that I have personally experienced on our land, even though we had branch engineering do our engineering out of great due diligence, and we could not get soil borings deep enough to show us that we actually built on fill land that was from a previous slide. These things are wrought with high potential for problems, and I am speaking from experience. We should not consider this annexation or go forward from there. And I would remind the city council members that this engineer tried to talk down to you to say that we should just take the average slope, which is laughable in mathematical terms. So please remember that this person might call us the neighbors in a way that is really looking down on us, but we are experienced people living in these areas, living in Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you.
No
Anybody
other
else? All right. Before we move to the next item, I want to note for people who are tracking this, the Finley Heights is not going to come up for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 more items down the road. So we'll get to it. It's just not immediately next. Next item, please.
Next item is resolutions. Resolution number 1 is a resolution of necessity Jasper Trunk Sanitary Sewer Extension, Phase 3. That's P21065. Jesse Jones is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Tonight, we're seeking your approval of a resolution of necessity for the Jasper Trunk Sanitary Sewer Project. Yeah, can we pull up the diagram, please? This is a trunk sewer extension in southeast Springfield. It goes along Jasper Road, and this next phase of the project goes from Mount Vernon, roughly Mount Vernon, out to the intersection of Brand S Road and Bob Straub Parkway. It crosses 5 private property parcels, and the council had previously approved a resolution of necessity that allowed us to go negotiate easements across those parcels. We've successfully negotiated with 4 of the 5 property owners to get the easements that we need. We are currently been negotiating with the 5th property owner, and we are at an impasse after working for a year on this. And we have worked with outside legal counsel to help move the negotiations forward. And they have recommended that we get a new resolution of necessity for this parcel, and that has the specific easement boundaries and square footages as shown in the documents. So tonight we're seeking that approval of that new resolution of necessity. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions? All right.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 1, a resolution exercising the power of eminent domain and authorizing a resolution pursuant to ORS 223.005 and ORS 223.105 and ORS 35.600 through 625 concerning acquisition of easements and or right-of-way necessary for the Jasper Trunk Sanitary Sewer Extension Phase 3 project P21065.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber.
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yes.
Counselor Rodley.
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell.
Yes.
Counselor Doyle.
No.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes.
Motion passes 5 yeses, 1 no. Next item, please.
Resolution 2 is Federal Aid Projects IGA Amendments Delegation, and Amanda Clinton is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Amanda Clinton. I'm the Senior Contracts Analyst with Development and Public Works under the direction of Christy Kruger. Christy's responsible for the ODOT certification program for the city. I'm here for 2 reasons tonight. As you may be aware, Capital Engineering has completed the federal certification process in order to deliver our own federal aid projects as a certified agency. As part of this program, there are multiple intergovernmental agreements between the city and the state. The first IGA is what I call the umbrella IGA, which is an overall IGA between the city and the state, which outlines the guidelines set forth by the certification program, which is referenced in attachment 3. This IGA is a 20-year agreement. Then there are supplemental agreements, which are agreements for each federal aid project under the certification program. Examples of the federal aid projects are Mill Street, Franklin Boulevard Phase 1, Franklin Boulevard Phase 2, and each project has their own agreements, as well as IGAs within each project, such as IGAs for design, right-of-way, and construction engineering. We're asking the council to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute first, our local agency certification program agreement, the umbrella agreement I spoke about. And this agreement has been reviewed and stamped by our assistant city attorney and is now ready to be executed upon council direction. Secondly, we're asking for ongoing delegation of authority for the city manager to be able to sign ODOT project IGAs and amendments over 100,000. These include all federal aid certification statewide transportation improvement program projects. We call them STIP. Which are in our capital improvement program budget, which was approved by council in January of this year. The reason we're requesting delegation of authority is because Springfield Municipal Code states we need council approval for any IGA and amendments over 100,000. This often can push our project timelines out extensively, delaying our projects. This delegation of authority would allow our team and ODOT to limit risk, increase project timelines, save a lot of staff time, and keep public service uninterrupted. We're asking the council to authorize the city manager to be able to execute these federal aid projects without having to seek council approval every time authorization is needed. However, all agreements would still be reviewed and approved by the city attorney's office, and council would still approve all construction contracts. We're asking for delegation of authority through the current 2024-2027 STIP cycle, and we will come back to council to request delegation of authority again for following STIP cycles.
Are there any questions? Okay, before I turn it over to Councilor Pictionary, I think this is a really big deal for us. If the public is following, how long Mill Street has taken, this has been a contributing factor, is the ability for the city to actually deliver these types of projects. So thank you for doing the work. I really appreciate it. It kind of moves everything from an infrastructure perspective and then just a little bit further ahead. Joe?
Yes, thank you. And I happily make a motion to adopt resolution number 2, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a local agency certification program agreement with ODOT and delegating authority to the city manager to execute supplemental project authorizations for federal aid projects adopted into the statewide transportation improvement program, otherwise known as STIP, for the funding period ending September 30th, 2027.
Second.
Is there any discussion to the motion? Councilor Weber?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just have a question regarding the scope of work. How were these projects determined? I'm looking specifically at Fifth Street, and I drive that road every day, and it feels a little tight to me, but I'm not an expert in that arena, so I'm just curious why we've chosen that off as a project.
Fifth Street is not a part of the federal funding, so that would be a separate project. So these particular projects that we're asking for delegation of authority are only federal aid projects. So that's a part of the overall STIP program, which then we also vote on, the council and mayors vote on that regarding our budget, our capital budget. So anything that's in the STIP is in our capital budget.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Councilor Weber.
Yes.
Councilor Mo.
Yes.
Councilor Rodley.
Yes.
Councilor Blackwell.
Yes.
Councilor Doyle.
Yes.
And Councilor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is any business from the city council.
Corey?
Did you even look before you said that?
It's my peripheral vision. I saw your hand up.
I always have business. First, I have two things. One, I normally wear my Public Works hat when we do Public Works, but I couldn't pick a favorite tonight because all three were fantastic. And nobody else has given me a hat. It's just to the chiefs. I don't have a hat for either of those. So I did not. So I don't want my Public Works friends to think that I was slighting them. Because as you know, I love Public Works. You're my people. Second, tomorrow is the last day to vote. It is the primary. So please, if you have not got your fabulous mail ballots in, you have until 8 to get them into a box. And we have one right downstairs here at City Hall. And you can also mail them. And they, as long as they're postmarked by tomorrow, they will still count. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I had one quick announcement. So Memorial Day is coming up, and on May 27th, and it will be in the Springfield Veterans Plaza. So I'm inviting folks to join us along with our partner Willamette Lane in the American Legion Post 40 in honoring and remembering Airman Trinity Reinhardt of Springfield at 10 a.m. on Memorial Day, May 27th at our Veterans Plaza. The event's going to start at 10 a.m. with an F-15 flyover. Community members are invited to attend and help in honoring and remembering Airman Reinhardt. And there will be seating available and refreshments afterwards. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is business from the city manager. Item number 1 is Glenwood Land Use Application Initiation. Ally Camp and Mark Rust are here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here with Mark Rust, Planning Manager, Ally Camp Economic Development Manager. We are here today with a packet of land use applications from an applicant and landowner in the Glenwood area. This item was first brought to you in October for a work session to discuss council's interest in supporting a request from the landowner and their tenant, Atcor Pipes. Atcor and its property owner wish to use a piece of adjacent land for storage, and right now they are outgrowing their current business space. The piece of land is currently constrained by 2 rail spurs, and it is zoned employment mixed use. Because of this constraint, it's really challenging to achieve the goals of employment mixed use, which is to add employment through offices or headquarters facilities. So the property owner and tenant have proposed rezoning the property or moving it through a plan change and zone amendment so that they can use it for a different purpose to support the business. In October, council indicated initial support for a hybrid approach where the applicant prepares the materials and you all could consider initiating the application. So we are back with prepared materials for your consideration. Mark is here for any technical questions that may come up too.
Are there any questions?
Okay.
All right, Joe.
I'd like to make a motion to initiate the applicant's type 4 Metro Plan amendment and type 3 zoning map amendment for 2.9 acres of real property located on Newman Street at tax map 18-03-03-14, tax lot 200.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is property management contract, and Ally Camp is here for this item as well.
Hi, Mayor and Council. In your packet today, you have a draft contract for your consideration for commercial property management services with Campbell Commercial Real Estate. Before I get into any more explanation, I just want to note that we have 2 representatives from Campbell Commercial here today, Patrick and Tim. If questions arise, the contract in front of you is for a little over 3 fiscal years, and it comes to a total of $235,400. That cost is broken down over the 3+ years in section 15 in attachment 1 in front of you. We propose this to be a shared contract between the City of Springfield and the Springfield Economic Development Agency, which would fall under the 2 organizations' cooperative services agreement. This contract was sole sourced after an unsuccessful RFP back in September for commercial property management services. The service was solicited to bring in appropriate expertise, open up staff capacity, and add process to our leasing efforts with all of our owned property. Campbell Commercial has been utilized by partners and in Lane County, and staff met with them to vet them over multiple meetings to assure responsibility, responsiveness, and suitability for the job. I can go into a little bit more about the resolution. Just briefly, a resolution was included in your packet too, which references leasing kind of direction for Booth Kelly. That resolution includes a draft lease. Should the contract with Campbell move forward, we anticipate them continuing to use that draft lease.
Any questions, Corey?
So I know that, and this was going to be a question, and then you pointed it out. This is going to be shared between the city and Springfield Economic Development Agency. Is this same exact thing going to then come in front of the CETA board?
From my understanding, and I'll look to Christina, our cooperative services agreement allows us to approve a contract by the council and it can still be used by CETA, so no separate approvals needed.
Okay, thank you.
Victoria?
Just a quick question, and I don't want to seem bad, but if we're talking about a 3-year contract, and what if after a year or two, we're not happy with the service? Are we locked into that 36 months?
There is termination language in the contract.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're ready for you.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to direct the city manager to enter into an agreement substantially in the form provided with Campbell Commercial Real Estate for commercial property management services.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is the annexation of territory to the city of Springfield, annex 7 acres of vacant residential property located at map 18-02-02-00, a portion of tax lot 00500. Tom Severs is here for this item.
All right, I've got some additional instructions before the staff report. Now is the time in the agenda for the council to conduct a second reading on the proposed annex of approximately 7 acres of property in the vicinity of South 71st and South 72nd, known as Finley Heights. The council conducted a public hearing on this matter on April 1st, 2024, and the hearing was closed at that time. Because this is a land use application, the council needs to disclose ex parte contacts with any of the parties. An ex parte contact is a discussion of the application with any parties outside of the public hearing and written record of public comments. If any counselors have had such contacts, please disclose the substance of that contact so that we can allow the applicant to respond.
I'm just trying to clarify what that means. Can you help me with that?
Yes, so if council has spoken to any neighbors since the public hearing or before the public hearing and and that didn't get disclosed during the April 1st public hearing, or if you've spoken with the applicant directly, for example, since the public hearing and that wasn't, or in a way that wasn't disclosed at time of the public hearing, then the substance of that conversation needs to be disclosed so that we can determine if it's information that's not in the record that might bear on your decision, or if it's information that's already in the record.
Okay, so any contact you've had since April 1st?
Or before that, if you had contact that you didn't disclose or reference in your deliberations at the April 1st meeting.
Okay, because I was doing research today and I did reach out to the applicant and ask some questions. So I just wanted to make sure that was, I just wanted clarification questions.
Is it clarification of information in the record?
Yes.
Is it clarification that's not addressed in the supplemental staff report or other findings?
It is addressed in the supplemental
Okay.
findings.
Then that's, I think no further responses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's in the record.
Explicit responses from everybody that they have had no other contacts.
That's my recommendation, is to just do it by word.
Okay, Counselor Weber,
No.
Counselor Mo,
No.
Counselor Rodley,
No ex parte contacts.
Counselor Blackwell.
No.
Well, we've heard from Counselor Doyle already. So Counselor Pictionary.
I have had some ex parte contact with some of the actually one of the residents in the area, but nothing in our conversation was in addition to what was not already disclosed in previous hearings.
And I've had no ex parte contact. So the second point that we need to kind of talk through, and I may need some help here, is really there are two options, right? One of them is for us to try to include testimony we've heard tonight and give the applicant a chance to respond. One of them is to exclude it. Now, we had the applicant, it sounds like, come in the middle and sort of respond to the first half of the public, and then we had one person after that. So somehow we've managed to end up in, option 3. Yeah.
Mayor, my recommendation, so I kept track during the public comments of what I believe to be new information that wasn't necessarily in the record. The applicant did have a chance to respond to all of those comments and did so. specifically reference to high hazard fire risk area mapping. Risks associated with heavy vehicle traffic that might be different than the slope issue, and mountain gate landslide stability related issues, which are not relevant because they're actually not proximate to the location. The applicant had a chance to respond to all of that, so I believe that's not an issue. The only other comment I heard that was not reflected in the record, I believe is not relevant to criteria of approval, and the council can just explicitly decide to disregard that, which was the comment from Ms. Tomcall that branch engineering did there, as in the Tom Call's geotechnical report, and was not able to get deep enough to show the depth of the landslide. That information is not directly relevant, I think, to your decision tonight. And also there's similar information from soil test pits and what the applicant provided this morning. So it's consistent with information that's already in the record, but also not necessarily relevant. So I think you could exclude that evidence, that piece of evidence that was new only. Otherwise, everything else was either addressed or is information already in the record.
Do we have to take explicit action to include it in the record, or?
You as the presider should make that statement, but it doesn't need a vote by council.
Okay. And the other question I had was the applicant asked that we consider the engineering study that they submitted this morning. Do I need to do anything with that?
I recommend that you do include that in the record, and we've prepared supplemental findings that were distributed and are also posted on the city's website this afternoon in response to that report. That report was also in response to comments submitted by the public on April 10th, which was also after the hearing was closed. Those comments are addressed in the staff report. And so for that reason, I recommend that you just include both pieces of information. I will note that the applicant's submittal this morning does not change the staff recommendation, and that's discussed in those supplemental findings, and I know Tom will go into that as well.
Okay, before we get to the staff report, I want to note that we're explicitly including testimony that we've heard from the public today, including the response from the applicant, as well as including the report that they submitted this morning by email of additional findings. I will note that we're also excluding the last public citizen that testified, the Tom Call testimony, from consideration this evening. So before we hear the staff report, I would like to explain the options for the city council to move forward on this application. As we will hear from the planning staff, the findings in the staff report have been updated, and the staff now recommend that we do not approve the ordinance tonight. Here are our options. First, we could approve the ordinance tonight after the second reading. If we do that, the council will need to adopt different findings than what is included in the staff report to show the criteria of the approval are met. Second, we could deny the annexation application based on the current staff report and findings. If we vote to deny the application, then we will adopt the proposed, then we will not adopt the proposed ordinance, and the denial will be the city's final decision. Last, we could take no action tonight and allow the applicant to submit more information to the city to show that the criteria of approval are met, and allow the staff to renegotiate the annexation agreement. This would require us to reopen the public hearing and conduct a third reading of the ordinance this fall. Now it's Tom Sievers who will provide the staff report, and then the council will conduct our deliberations.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. I'm Tom Sievers, Senior Planner with the Current Planning Section. We are here tonight for the second reading of an ordinance to annex an approximately 7-acre vacant piece of property located on South 71st Street in southeastern Springfield. You'll be hearing about the updated information in the staff report that has led staff to a new conclusion. The AIS packet also contained a briefing memo with responses to the questions presented by councilors on April 1st. As you may recall, the proposed annexation area is outlined in red and comprises only a portion of tax lot 500, which is outlined in yellow. The other portion is already inside the city limits. There are 4 criteria of approval for annexations in the Springfield Development Code, which were discussed in full during the first reading. Staff updated the findings based on testimony and further evidence. which affected the conforming statuses of criterion C and criterion D. The conformance of criterion A remains unchanged. The conformance of criterion B remains unchanged, but staff did provide an additional finding to note that the overall development area is considered as being not serviceable in the city's residential lands housing needs analysis. The analysis concludes that slopes above 25% are considered undevelopable or unserviceable, and most of the property in that analysis was mapped that way. Criterion C was affected for the following reasons. Upon further analysis of this criterion, Goal 7, Natural Hazards, Policy C.32 of the Metro Plan details that local governments shall require site-specific soil surveys and geologic studies where potential problems exist. Given the degree to which the site is encumbered by steep slopes and ogami mapping of landslide risks, it would be prudent for the applicant to include analysis of the safe developability of the site at the annexation stage rather than deferring it to a future development application. The annexation application did not include site-specific geologic studies or grading plans showing that property can be safely developed. In the lead up to this meeting, the applicant stated that they have completed a geotechnical study and prepared a tentative plat showing the extent of grading. The applicant provided a geotechnical report and conceptual water supply plan this morning, which was briefly analyzed. No further grading information has been provided. During the completeness check meeting held on December 15th, 2023, the fire marshal's office stated that they would need to have an infrastructure plan for water supply and safe physical access before supporting the annexation. Staff supported this by asking for a grading or utility plan that would prove access feasibility. However, it is not a required component of an annexation submittal. The applicant ultimately did not provide any such plans with the annexation submittal. Up to this point, the evidence in the record indicates that the property likely cannot be served by streets meeting the city's standards for the following reasons. Per SDC 3.3.525, no new driveways or intersections are allowed where street slopes exceed 12%. No street can exceed 15% for more than 200 feet, and no street may exceed 18% for any distance at all. The slope of South 71st Street fronting the property appears to exceed the maximum 12% allowed for any new intersections. It does not appear to be possible to extend new streets from South 71st Street to the subject property consistent with the hillside development overlay standards without significant regrading to current streets. The tentative subdivision plan provided for the 2022 DIM shows segments of streets through the adjoining properties needed to reach the annexed property in areas that would exceed the maximum street grades in SDC 3.3.525, unless there was significant regrading of hillside based on the city's topographic maps. Thus, to show the property could be served by a transportation network in an orderly and efficient manner, there needs to be some information about geologic stability of the site and the feasibility of massive regrading of the street network. I'm going to jump ahead for one of my slides here. As previously stated, the applicant recently provided a geotechnical report prepared by Branch Engineering. This report largely focused on the western part of the overall site that is currently within the city limits. Branch noted that they were not able to access the majority of the eastern part of the site. The information in the report states that further investigation is needed and that the Zone C or Phase 2 area, that being highlighted in red, the annexation area, that is a former landslide and potentially unstable. Therefore, at this time, the evidence in the record does not show that the minimum level of key urban facilities and services can be provided in an orderly and efficient manner. The conformance of criterion D was affected for the following reason. Specific fiscal impacts to the city will depend on the feasibility of extending the public transportation network to serve the site with public roads and cannot be determined based on the evidence in the record as cited under criterion C. Therefore, the proposed annexation agreement is not adequate to mitigate fiscal impacts of the city because the extent of those impacts are currently unknown. During the public hearing on April 1st, public comment drew attention to the Dogami mapping of the area. This map shows the susceptibility of shallow landslides, those occurring less than 15 feet below the ground surface. Moderate is in orange and high susceptibility is in red. This map, the susceptibility of deep landslides, those occurring beyond 15 feet deep, again, the orange shows moderate and red represents high susceptibility. Lastly, this exhibit was provided by the applicant to show the new subdivision layout with topographic lines. This does not show the extent of needed cut or grading on the site. It does show that the extent of the test pits for the analysis, the geotech analysis, were focused on the western side of the lot, as opposed to the eastern side, which is labeled as landslide area. Because the new findings do not satisfy all criteria of approval, council is within its authority to deny the proposed annexation. Thank you, councilors and mayor, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
Now is the time for the city council to deliberate on the annexation application. As a reminder, we can vote to adopt the ordinance, which will require us to change the findings. We can vote to deny the application, or we can vote to reopen the hearing in the fall and allow the applicant to submit more information and renegotiate the annexation agreement. Are there any questions for Tom before we really dive into deliberations? But
Yeah. So I just have a couple questions about this because I tried to do a deep dive on this and this morning. But on April 1st, when we had the first reading and the public hearing, at that time, the recommendation was that the app complied with standards and provisions of the city code and state statutes. And then it was after that we received public testimony and what have you. So I'm trying to understand the timeline mainly because, I work in public works as well. And I'm not used to having us jump straight from, hey, it seems like we're complying to a denial. And so, my tendency is to say, why aren't we going with the opportunity for the applicant to address, like, we need the grading, we need these different things. And so I'm trying to find out what happened between April 1st or April 10th. Did you go to the applicant and say, these are the concerns we have, you need to provide us with a geotech report that has this grading and give them the specific things that we're going to potentially cause a denial, so that they knew that we're looking at denying this if you don't provide us this stuff? That's what I'm trying to figure out. So.
Sure. Between the first hearing and now, let's say, or from April 10th until now, staff was not aware of the status of any further plans that the applicant may have had or put together. It does take some considerable amount of time to create a geotechnical report. And if that was something, I believe Mr. Mortier did say that he had that prepared, at which point, especially that it is not typically a requirement of an annexation approval, it could have been submitted along with the other materials in the annexation application, especially at the point of the completeness check meeting when fire expressed their concern for access to the site. So if that report had been prepared up to that point and staff was aware of that, then we could have asked for it at that time. However, we did ask for an infrastructure plan or something else that would have shown the feasibility or any other developability criteria or details that would have helped us come to a more supportable conclusion. So with that lack of information and based on what is in the record, at least up to that point of the first hearing, that's what staff had to go based off of. The burden of proof is on the applicant, and especially after that completeness check meeting where we expressed our concern, and even originally the November 2022 DIM on the topic, where we did express concern about the landslide susceptibility, very high risk and stuff like that. If this information was available to us, I wish it had been supplied to us.
Okay, thank you.
Christina.
Yeah, I also want to clarify that the decision whether or not to extend the public hearing and accept more information is the council's decision. So it would have been inappropriate for staff to contact the applicant and urge them to submit additional information. They certainly have the right to, as you've seen, they've submitted that information. They have the right to do that. I do know that staff provided the public comments that were submitted in writing right after the hearing. And then obviously we're in attendance at the public hearing that you had. So just want to clarify that it is the council's decision tonight, what you want to do in terms of the record and the hearing from this point forward.
I do understand that, but I also would think that if staff's intent is to deny an application, that we would then make the applicant aware of that. It just seems like that it changed after we got a lot of public, and I'm just saying that for due diligence and for due process, that to just jump from this first reading straight to denial just seemed, I mean, it's just not a process I'm used to seeing, so.
Nancy?
I think we can all agree that this has been a complicated matter. In terms of public administration, our job is to bring forward facts as we know them at the time. And we bring the strongest recommendation that we can at the time when we know it. There are also legal processes that come on the legislative part of public process that are under the purview of the legislative body, the elected officials. And so this is why we have public meetings, so that this type of discussion and deliberation can occur in the public, so that the public is aware of all of the information that we have at the time. And that is why we're going through this process tonight. So I actually am appreciative that we're having this public deliberation, because it shows that you as a council are very diligent in your work, and that this matter has been thoroughly vetted at the initial point when we receive materials, and then upon additional information during a public process. So again, when we have a public hearing, we're really tight, and we want to make sure that we do everything within the public process.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I guess my last point would be that if we land on denial tonight, then that applicant is given a list of the reasoning why, which kind of sounds like we already have. And then that applicant has the opportunity to reapply with the information that you're requesting and try again. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
One clarification on that. I believe we may have a 1-year requirement to wait in between similar applications. No, we don't. We no longer have that requirement. Only for plan amendments. Okay, thanks, Mark.
All right. Anybody else? We can start deliberations if people have comments they want to make too. All right. Steve.
Someday something will happen up there. City's growing. We need that. But right now, this application doesn't answer all the questions that we need to have answered before I will approve it. I will go for it. So.
Corey.
Thank you, Counselor Mo, for kicking us off. I want to say that I appreciate the time that we have taken to dig into this, and know that it's been, and I know that I sometimes am a little colloquial, know that it's been a little bit wiggly. And I went out there this afternoon because in addition to like reading all of this, and I just wanted to go out there and just really sort of absorb it. And I just happened to be there when the school bus was there, letting all of these children off to head off into their homes and their houses. And I think for me, that just really drove home the ecological considerations of this, that there are families that are living there. And there is, the consideration for landslides, I think, is something that we cannot ignore. And then we just layer into that the concerns about, are we going to be able to get services to these folks? And as y'all know, like, I am super pro housing. I want all the housing in all the places. And I do not think that this is a place at this time that we should be putting houses in. So I will be voting against it.
Michelle.
First, I want to thank all of the folks that came and gave us public testimony, provided all the history, helping us understand that there were some issues up there that we may not have been aware of when we initially had this conversation. So thank you very much for that. After weighing all of those comments, applicant response, and all of the documentation that we've read through, I I'm not supportive of this annexation at this time.
Anybody else? Victoria?
I too am not supportive of approving the annexation. I do like the idea of option 3, which is to bump it to the fall, give people, reopen the public hearing and allow for the applicant to provide the information. But I will go with whatever the majority of the council goes with, and I know how the public feels, so.
I was kind of leaning towards that as well, just reopening it and letting someone that's applying for this to bring a little more information back before just giving a denial. Of course, I'm, for housing and for development on all levels. So I'm struggling with this one. But after, hearing public comment, I lived up in Mountain Gate when the slide happened up there. I know that that's a scary thing. We don't want to add housing that could possibly negatively affect other housing, of course. There's a lot of items that were brought up tonight that, make this sound like not the best idea. So, I'm a little torn, but if everyone's about, denial, at least that answered my question that they could come back in a year and reapply, get their ducks in a row, then I could possibly go with that as well. But I'm not for passing it at this time.
Joe?
Thank you very much. I like how you use the term ducks because I'm one of those things, I'm just thinking about this and it's like, well, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck in the sense of the topography and the geography has not changed. It's been looked at, it's been denied before, being as far as not feasible. But I side with Victoria in the sense that it's like, okay, there's no, we're not, even if we say no, which is where I'm leaning, does not mean no forever. And it's not even a year from now. They can apply next week and supply more information. But based on the information that's been provided by staff and all the written comments and the verbal comments from that, is that I can't support this moving forward until they come back to us with a new application. So I'm ready to make a motion whenever you are, Mayor.
Yeah, I want to make a couple of comments. I think we're all struggling with this one. This council is a particularly pro-development council and wants to see both housing and economic development through the city. And when I really stepped back and I just read the material and thought about what was actually going on, it's clear that this application, we should deny this application. It's just not, there's too many questions from the slope material, all the information around slopes, to when you read the analysis around, emergency services, it's not clear we can serve this area at all. And frankly, right at the core part of it, it's the roads and the infrastructure. Like that road is pretty remote. And the idea that we're going to put more folks up there and get more services up there just doesn't seem plausible. I don't see a way in good conscience that we could serve this area at this point.
Yes.
Joe?
Thank you, Mayor. And you mentioned something that I forgot to mention too, is that they're talking about 70th Street, and 70th Street, I encourage anybody to go up there and look at it. It's nothing more than a paved logging road. It's extremely narrow. It can be extremely dangerous, and I cannot see being part of my name on some part of some paper somewhere that says, yes, build up there and have a lot of loss of property and or subject people to some pretty significant dangers. So I'm ready to make a motion if that's okay with you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to deny application 811-24-000004 type TYP or type 4, annexing certain territory map 18-2-2-00 portion of tax lot 00500 to the city of Springfield based on the staff report and findings in the agenda packet as attachment 2 exhibit D with the supplemental findings dated May 20.
Second.
And Christina, before we call the vote, can you just clarify for everybody? A vote of yes is denying the application.
Correct. A vote of yes would deny the application. The final decision would be reduced to writing in the form of a notice of decision with the staff report and findings attached to that would get mailed off, and would likely ask the mayor to sign that notice of decision on behalf of the council.
All right, great. Thank you. Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber.
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yes.
Counselor Rodley.
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell. Counselor Doyle.
Aye.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Any other business from the city manager?
A few items. One, I wanted to express my appreciation to the city council and also to the community members that came here to testify tonight. I know it's not easy to come and speak to your governments, and you all did exceptionally well. I know Representative Fazio has a little bit of experience, so I don't count him. However, all of you came in your 3-minute allotted time and very concisely, and that was a masterclass in how to give excellent public testimony. Also, I just wanted to say, oddly, this is my favorite part of the job. And that is because I passionately believe in our government, and the government's job is to hear from its community and its constituents. And I'm very proud that in our nation and in our city, we are not afraid to have difficult conversations and to have them respectfully and have them informed by data and reason. So I just wanted to say that. Also, this past Saturday, we had our spring cleanup. That was a lot of fun to go to. Thank you for everybody who came out and dropped their stuff off. And also to everybody who volunteered. It was a great time. Finally, I wanted to acknowledge and very important accreditation by our police department from the Northwest Accreditation Alliance. Our police department, after long and intensive work, received this accreditation. And to me, this is yet another step of how they are showing how their transparency, their accountability, their professionalism, and their dedication. And Chief Shearer and Deputy Chief Raish are excellent leaders in this organization. They're committed to having a learning organization, and I am incredibly proud of them. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any business from the city attorney?
No business.
We are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.